Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program, Assemblyman Michael Norris. Mike Norris represents the 144th Assembly District in New York State, an assembly district that includes the counties of Niagara, Erie, and Orleans. And we want to thank you folks all across Western New York for tuning in for our show today. Assemblyman, always a pleasure to see you.
It certainly is a pleasure to see you too, Mike, and thank you for having me on the show today.
We are in the I appreciate you being here because we're in the throes of budget talks and budget negotiations here at the state capitol. We will update you folks as to where we are in the process and what things look like for Western New York. But first, you were telling me that you've got some potentially exciting news for volunteer firefighters in Western New York. There's going to be some recruitment going on and maybe an expansion of some benefits.
Yes. I want to just, first of all, thank the volunteer firemen back in my district, 144th in Niagara, Erie, and Orleans. I've had the privilege over the last 2.5 months to actually go out and to join many of the volunteer fire companies at their installation dinners. And it's always a joy and a pleasure to be out there speaking with them and to recognize them for their hard work and for their service to the community. Many folks don't know, the regular constituents, that each year volunteer fire service saves New York State $3 billion in taxes. It's an amazing thing. And when there's a problem out in the district, whether it be someone's having a medical emergency, there's a car accident, or a big fire recently, even in the city of Lockport, where 60 volunteer fire companies came to help the city of Lockport Fire Department at a massive fire last August. And I always thank the volunteer firemen when I'm out there. What I would encourage everyone to think about back home is if you live in a jurisdiction in the town where your local volunteer fire company is to think about joining. You can do it in various capacities. You can be a volunteer firefighter, you could be an EMT, you could be for the local auxiliary and assist them when they need help. You can also do non-firefighting things such as doing bookkeeping and helping maintain the hall. So there's many different things that you can do, and I encourage everyone to think about joining the fire service and providing the assistance to our local community. There is a recruitment that's going to be coming up on the weekend of April 29th and 30th in all across New York State, and particularly in the Western New York region. And you can go to their website, www.recruitny.org. You can find the information for your local fire departments there and what time they're going to be having the recruitment. Also, I'd like to just say that my experiences being out and speaking to the volunteer firemen at these different events have encouraged me to sign on to Assembly Bill 711. And what that is it will actually expand the coverage under the Volunteer Fireman Benefit Law to include individuals who, because of their service, unfortunately, has come down with some sort of a cancer. And right now, some of those benefits do not include if you receive cancer as a result of the smoke, of the odors, of your service in the volunteer fire company, does not include that under the volunteer fireman benefit law. So I am proud to say that I have joined on as a sponsor of that bill. And I also want to let the voters know back home, because this is so important to me, is that there's also an omnibus fire service protection bill as well. My good friend, Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, is a chief sponsor, and I have signed on to that. What would include on those is an expansion for the personal income tax credit, and also if you join the fire service for over 4 years, and also for your vehicles. If you use a vehicle, for example, your truck, in the service of volunteer firemen, that would be an exemption. You would not have to pay the fee. So under that bill, sponsored by Phil Palmisano, Assembly member, I've joined on to. Those are some of the provisions that we're fighting for the volunteer firemen back home.
It is such a huge commitment to join the responsibility and the commitment of time and effort that makes sense. To give something back to them for committing of themselves to the community. I mean, it's a public service to serve like that.
It is, and I've been out at the fire company dinners, as I've said before, but I've seen where people have been on 199 calls. For example, the mayor of Youngstown, Raleigh Reynolds, did 199 calls himself. I've seen others above that, 300, 350 calls. I mean, that's a call
That's
almost
all.
every day or every other day that they're taking out of their time, away from their families. And I have to also say, Mike, I always say at the Volunteer Fire, we have to thank the significant others, the spouses of the Volunteer Fire Company members, because those are the ones who are taking care of their families back home when they're at a call serving us. So really, it's a family effort. We thank everyone for their service to the Volunteer Fire Companies.
But you got to be warned that if you keep going to all those volunteer firefighter dinners, they feed you well.
They feed me very well.
You're going to need some extra treadmill time.
Yes, I get extra steps in every time I come home from one of those, taking the dog for a walk.
That's it. You got to start walking more. That's all there is to it. Here at the state capitol, we are knee-deep in budget talks. The governor started off this year by putting his budget proposal out on the table, which then led to a series of legislative hearings and department heads, commissioners coming in and talking about how they envision the governor's budget taking place. Well, since then, just recently now, the Assembly has passed a budget, which is a budget proposal. The Senate has passed yet a separate budget proposal. So now there's 3 budget proposals out there on the table. I suppose that might sound like it's muddying the water some, but it's actually meaning we're, like I said, knee deep in the serious budget talks now, because the Assembly's staked its position, the Senate has staked its along with the governor, and now it's time for the leadership to get together and really kind of hash things out. We now know everyone's priorities this year.
And it comes down to priorities. Now, last week we did have the one-house budget bill in the Assembly, and in that Assembly one-house budget bill, they increased taxes and fees by $7 billion. The last thing that we need in New York State is to increase taxes and fees. We have to be fiscally responsible and select the priorities that are most important to our regions and to the entire state. So I did vote against the one-house Assembly budget bill because it's just too much in taxes. However, I will commend the Western New York delegation for their hard work, and even the members across the aisle, Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples and Schimminger, Kearns and Ryan, who are fighting very hard for the area in Western New York. For example, the $400 billion for the Buffalo Billion for more economic development. I believe that more economic development for Western New York is important. I believe there should be proper oversight over the contracts and over the process, but I commend the governor and I commend the Assembly majority for fighting for that priority. The other things I like to just also say is that to be fair to direct care, Mike, you and I have spoke about that before. Right now there's a standard in New York State for the fast food industry where they would make $15 an hour. Many of our individuals who are helping our senior citizens and those with challenges, physical challenges, don't make that salary, and they leave because they have to go elsewhere for work. I will also commend the Assembly majority in this case for putting that in their budget, as well as the state Senate. I have great senators like Senator Rob Ortt, Mike Ransenhofer, Pat Gellivan, Chris Jacobs on that side in West New York who've been fighting for that as well. And the Western New York Psychiatric Center. There's a closure there. Both the majorities in the Senate and in the Assembly have put that into their budget. So I'm very hopeful over the negotiations over the next 2 weeks that these things stay intact, but at the same time, we have a budget that's fiscally sound and responsible so we can continue to afford the priorities that are necessary.
I want to be clear, you're saying the legislature, both houses, are saying that the Western New York Center should remain open?
Yes, on both sides, the majority in the Senate and the majority in the Assembly, both are saying that. We'll see what comes out in the final budget bill with the negotiations with the governor, but those items are both in there, and as well as be fair to direct care.
All right, but I'll take you back to the Assembly's one-house budget proposal.
Yes.
There's a lot of spending in there. There's a lot of taxes in there, and in fact, it rivals what the budget the governor's put out there. That's a lot of budget that's out there for discussion now out on the negotiating table.
Yes, I mean, of course, in negotiations, you state your mark, and then you'll come towards the middle. And I'm confident that's going to happen over the next 2 weeks. But I think it's very important, particularly for the taxpayers back home, to understand that I am fighting very hard. I am telling all my colleagues, we cannot afford new taxes on the people of Western New York. And I also wanted to say that it comes down to priorities, and we have to fight for our fair share, and that's what we're trying to do in this massive budget.
All right. Any discussion, new discussion on the Uber situation? Now, I don't even know if that's part of the budget process or if that's a secondary debate that's taking place here at the state capitol.
In terms of Uber, Mike, I was privilege to be at the NCAA tournament here in Buffalo, New York over the last weekend. And we had great games. We had such excitement downtown. We had 18,000 people in the arena. They were at our restaurants. But there was one thing missing, and that was Uber. And I am very embarrassed to say that we're the largest city in the United States without Uber ride sharing, including Lyft. And I have been, as you know, a strong advocate for Uber. And I encourage all of my constituents to please go to my website. I need your help. We need to convince the Assembly majority that the time is now for Uber and ride-sharing services in upstate New York. So I encourage all of you to please go to my website, please sign my petition in support of ride-sharing, and by doing so, I will be delivering that message to both the governor and to the Assembly Democrats, saying that it's very important for our economy. And I'll tell you, not only for the NCAAs, we have things in the 144th District. We have wine trails. We have a fishing industry. We have, in Lockport, we've got the canal tours and other things. All of this matters because if they can get a ride through ride sharing, they will be able to partake in these tourism activities, particularly the wine trail. I've heard that because it's a safety issue. Someone has to, rightly so, be the designated driver. But if they have a ride share, they all can partake in the industry, and everyone will be protected. So I encourage everyone to please sign my petition on my website, and I'm going to continue this fight for the people of Western New York.
Yeah, you've laid out pretty well all the benefits that you think the region would see from Uber, and that's all backed up by some personal experience you've had yourself when you've done some traveling, right?
That's right. When I went to the inauguration for President Trump, I used Uber myself. I pulled up the phone, hit the app, and next thing we know, the car was there, and they took me over to the airport. The service was great. It was the car was clean. The driver was fantastic, and we were there and everything. There's no cash. You just hit the app, and it's all there. And it is about convenience, and it's about economic development, and this is an important thing. When I go across my district, this is one of the major things I hear about. Mike, when are you going to bring Uber to Western New York and your area? Well, I'm fighting for you, but I need your help too. Please sign that petition.
Regis, we're down to our last couple minutes here. Sure. And I know you're kind of new to this budget negotiations that's going on here at the state capitol. We had the big storm that slowed things down here in Albany for a couple of days last week. Just slowed them down, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Maybe not. We're not as used to it as you folks out in Buffalo and Western New York are. But we've had our share. It only slowed us down a little bit. But with that said, what are you hearing about if this budget's going to be on time this year? There was decades where budgets were late at the state capitol. Hasn't been the case the last few years, but sometimes those negotiations get a little tough.
I'm confident that we will see an on-time budget. We should have an on-time budget. The taxpayers of our district expect to have an on-time budget, and I'm hopeful that when it's all said and done, we will have an on-time budget. There's just one more thing I want to make sure I mention about the budget, and talking about the storm. I want to also thank all the highway workers out there. I had the privilege to be with them the week before the storm and fighting for additional CHIPS funding to protect our roads and our infrastructure. We stood here with our orange shirts and we did that. But I want to commend them and all of their hard work to make sure they clear the roads for us. I really appreciate their service to our local communities.
And we mentioned at the top of the program, we were talking a bit about firemen. You say you've got a boater safety course coming up.
We do. As you know, my district takes in most of Lake Ontario and Niagara County, all of the 4 towns, and we are sponsoring a boater safety course that is going to be held on Saturday, May 20th at the Barker Fire Company. I'm proud to say that Niagara County Sheriff Jim Vautour and his staff is sponsoring this, and if you would like to sign up for that boater course, I encourage you to please call the Sheriff's Department at 716-438-3346. That is 716-438-3346, and they will be happy to sign you up, and I look forward to seeing you there. It's very important that we have very safe waterways in our area.
A lot of water out there, and
Certainly
you want to
do.
be safe when you get out on it. Mike Norris, thanks very much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
We are out of time. We thank you folks, too, for spending your time, and we'll hope to see you soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.